Hello, Dental Team listeners. This is Kiera, and I am so excited for you to have part 2 of me and Fred Heppner going through associates, DSOs, how to really grow this. You guys, we had such an incredible first half of this episode. It was so long and so much information that I wanted to break it into 2 parts. So here's part 2. I hope you enjoy. And as always, thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time on the Dental Team podcast.
Should people be talking when they're in their 20s, 30s, or is it something where like start to think about it? I know Ryan and I from Dentist Advisors, we talk shop about this quite often of like there are studies that show that when you retire, you actually start to atrophy in life and there isn't as much of a purpose. And so we talk often of like, how can we continue that mental stamina, the things that are going to fulfill us, whether it's working or something else, a philanthropy, like whatever is going to keep you going as a human, whether you're working in the chair or you're not, I think is important. So that's where I was curious of like really probably connecting with you 3 to 5 years before we think we might retire, but with the caveat of, hey, if something were to happen to me, what would kind of be my exit strategy? Have your like death list like I do? Like if I die, this is what's going to happen. It's creepy, but it's awesome.
No, it's creepy and it is awesome. And at the same time, it's a really good conversation to have, because if we're 3 to 5 years out, then one of the first things to do is say, okay, so what's going to happen if you're not here? Mm-hmm. And that carries on to the discussion we had earlier. So once the discussion about, well, what do you want to do when you retire or you stop practicing dentistry? Then the questions start coming up. What about the economics? So
I was just going to say, like, is it sell? Is it DSO? Is it? Yeah, and also, absolutely. I mean, this to me also, I think might exponentially accelerate some people's plans because the DSOs are hot and it's like 10x EBITDA. That might accelerate your retirement or your sell because you're on a wave right now that who knows if in the next 20, 30, 40 years we'll be there. Fred, I'm super curious, like, how is this whole DSO model maybe shifting it for transitions, or is it? I'm curious.
It is. It's shifted quite a bit. But what it's shifted is a real desire for dentists to be able to sell their businesses and release the management responsibility and to have somebody else take that over.
The dream for every business owner.
I just want to do dentistry. I don't want to manage a business. Exactly. I don't want to manage people. I don't want to run the company. I want to be able to practice my trade.
Yep.
Well, I can tell you that in the last 15, 20 years, it's certainly exploded in dentistry, and not in a bad way. And here's why. Dentists graduating from dental school today need a place to work. Mm-hmm. The banks that loan money to dentists to buy dental practices are looking for dentists that have a couple years experience in dentistry. They have a production track record. The banks can see what it is that the dentist can do chairside. A good credit score and some liquidity, usually 8 to 10% of the purchase price of the business that they're looking at in cash. So one of the things to consider is graduating dentists should be able to make the minimum payments on their debt, on their student loans, on what debt they have, and begin to put money away as quickly as possible to gain some liquidity. So as we look at the equation of what DSOs are doing, they're providing them with a place to work. Because as dentists come out, I mean, a majority of dental practices that I work with, maybe you can echo this or discuss it, are just single dentist practices.
Totally, same.
Right. They don't have somebody called it a +1 at some point in time. And I thought, okay, well, that's decent. So you have the dentistry, but there's the ability to bring somebody on maybe 1 or 2 days a week. Mm-hmm. Well, that doesn't feed a hungry young dentist coming out of dental school who really has a lot of debt and wants to begin to work and develop a way to reduce that debt. They're looking for 4 days a week, 5. They might have a quality of life thing where they just want to work 3 10s and be off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. That's okay. But the point is that most private practices don't have the capacity to be able to bring on a full-time dentist and feed them right away and keep them very busy. The DSOs, corporate dentistry, have offices that can provide that place. So essentially, if a dentist comes out of school and begins to work, they may very well work for one of the corporate DSOs, which gives them experience. It gives them the ability to work 5 days a week. It gives them the ability to practice in what I call civilian dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
out of dental school, and that gives them the opportunity to be able to see what it's really like. I can tell you, Kiera, that 15 years ago, the most popular phone call I would get on my phone line was, "Hey, we just got 50 million from a private equity firm. We're starting a DSO, but we're different, and we want to buy practices from you because we heard you're good." And I just tell them, "Great, thanks very much. Get in line, register on my website, and when an opportunity comes up, I will email to you like I do everybody else the opportunity." Because most of my clients call and say, hard no to a DSO. I'm a private practitioner. I've got a legacy practice and I want to sell to another private dentist. Okay. So that was the second most popular call was, "I'm sick of working for a company. Find me a practice to buy."
Mm-hmm.
Now it's shifted. More so do I hear, "I'm sick of working for somebody else. Find me a private practice to buy. I'm ready to go." The DSO calls have filtered off a bit. And I don't know that that's a global representation of the DSOs starting to slow their buying and really focus on the profitability of the offices they have to really maintain the profitability
Yeah.
due to higher interest rates. Maybe they're slowing down their buying. Who knows? And the interesting thing about it is that it's somewhat of a closed loop in DSO work. You really can't get into and find out exactly what everybody is doing unless you're a member of their organizations, which is fine, and I respect that. It's private information, but it begs the question. And ultimately, if a dentist is looking to buy their own practice, eventually they're going to need those 1 to 2 years experience, liquidity, good credit score in order for them to go to one of the commercial banks and say, "I want to buy a practice and let me get a practice to buy and then we'll put it together."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I can tell you that private practice is alive and well. I'm very bullish on the individual dentist who's out there still practicing and doing quite well. I can also tell you that those kinds of doctor to doctor transitions are extremely successful.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is some people who look at a transition like that would think, "Oh my gosh, the dentist leaves, all the patients will leave. They'll go somewhere else. They'll go to other practices." Well, if that was true, let's carry that forth. If that was true, then that would mean that the loans that the dentist used to buy the practice would go in default, would they not?
Mm-hmm.
Because if all the patients left, there would be no revenue and they'd have to fold up camp and see you later, right?
Mm-hmm.
The default rate on dental practice loans still over the last 15, 20 years, and even recently, is 40 basis points. 100 basis points is 1%. 40 basis points is 0.4%. So if you follow the math, the default rate is less than half of 1% on the billions of dollars that are loaned by banks for dentists to buy practices.
Totally.
They don't fail.
They don't, and they're such
Okay.
a good investment. And I think that that's why so many people that's why I think DSOs are buying up practices. And I think that that's where so many private practice owners now, I would say I've watched where it used to be legacy practices, and there's still legacy practice
Mhm.
doctors who do not want to sell to a DSO. Like when
Right.
they're there, they want to sell doctor to doctor. They
Yep.
want to bring in an associate. They want to bring in partners.
Mhm.
I think by default, dentistry tends to be a more humanistic, very relationship model versus. I still think, though, right now, DSOs, you're right. I don't think people are getting as many calls. But what I will say is my doctors are probably getting 20 to 30 emails every month from a DSO interested in buying their practice. So they are getting it as private practice owners. And so I think that that's where, like I said, some people within the last 8 years bought a practice as a private practice. The DSOs, they were profitable. They were within the metrics that the DSO wanted. And it just made sense. It was like, I'm going to get 10x EBITDA on this. My EBITDA is great. It like no private party is going to pay me what this DSO is going to pay me. And while, yes, I'd love it to maintain a legacy practice, I'm in my 30s and I could basically have retirement today pending that. I mean, there's more risk selling out because they have a lot of it in their stocks and there's a whole game around that. But I think that that's where maybe some of the younger generation might be looking at transitions sooner than I think the more senior population of dentistry is. I think that there's starting to be this shift, and that's where I'm very curious of like maybe conversations need to be had sooner. Maybe
Yep.
because
Yep.
DSOs are aggressive on the emails to the dentist. Like it is wild. And
Yep.
they are sexy offers to them that are not always true. And that creeps me out too, because they're hearing a number. Like I had a doctor and he had a DSO come to him and they said, hey, we're going to give you 5 million. And he's like, here, it seems like a great deal. And I said, yeah, but you're going to do 5 million next year just in your own production. So that's actually a bad deal because you're already going to make that without selling to them and having to work for them for the next 5 to 10 years, or like 3 to 5 is usually what their requirement is. So again, I think that this is where it's like, how do we cut through that noise to know when I do transition? Because I think people are getting asked to transition from private practice sooner. You're right. They go work at the DSO. They go to some of those bigger corporate practices to get the experience. Then they go buy their private practice. And then it really is, or they do a startup. And then it's pretty aggressive because I think Wall Street's pretty hot right now and private equity is very, very luring, but they do have to hit certain requirements to join DSOs.
There are tons of verticals that people are getting into, the private equity is getting into, and you're right, there's a ton of money at it. You know, I would tell you that the devil is in the details. Mm-hmm. It may very well be that there are transitions that occur where a DSO or a corporation acquires the assets of a private practice and the dentist stays and works back in the office. And that transition works swimmingly well for the dentist who sells, for the DSO, and ultimately everything works out fine. There are others that don't, and they're out there. And I think what you mentioned earlier is, you know, I could get 5 million for my practice. Well, why would you? You would be able to make that in your earnings in 2.3 years, whatever it might be, whatever the math pencils out to be. But if you think about it, if 10 times EBITDA is their offering price, what are the details? Mm-hmm. How much cash at closing? Is there a work back or a work back arrangement where you will be paid to be the dentist? And what is your compensation? What are the benefits that you would receive? And what is the term of that work back arrangement? You're right. It's creeping up now more into 5 years. Mm-hmm. 15, 20 years ago, it was maybe, you know, stay on 1 or 2 years and we're good. Yeah. There's a clawback. There's a holdback provision that holds back part of the purchase price. And the dentist has to meet certain metrics from the trailing 12 months to be able to get that back. Well, let's pretend that the DSO comes in and sets up the practice and nothing changes and the business continues to grow and develop because there's more marketing, promotion, and advertising. There's better cost control. There's just better stuff going on, and that works. Well, what if it doesn't? What if all of a sudden the company comes in and says, we're changing these policies? You were Delta Dental Premier, we're jumping into PPOs because we've got really good reimbursement rates on these 12 PPO contracts. Well, if that reimbursement rate drops from fee for service, does that hinder the doctor to be able to generate the income necessary for that holdback to be acquired in the next 2 to 3 years? And then there's equity. You mentioned that they offer stock in the company to be able to ultimately participate in a recapitalization should that happen. Well, it'd be really interesting. And you're going to love this one. I know you're going to love this one. So for any of your listeners, any of your team clients, if they get approached by a DSO and they look at it and they think it's really, really good, have somebody look at it. Mm-hmm. What you will hear typically is you really don't need an advisor. You don't need an attorney. We've got all the contracts ready to go.
Lies.
You can
Lies.
Exactly. You can just take all of this and we'll be good. Well, trust but verify. And ultimately a good team would be able to review these. I would be glad to review. I review paperwork all the time from dentists that are looking to transition. And if there's an equity piece in that offer, I turn around and contact the DSO on behalf of the client, and I say, we'd like to see your financials. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
What do you mean? Well, you're asking my client to acquire stock in your company in lieu of cash at closing. Well, yeah, that's part of the deal. I need to see your financials. I need to advise my client on whether or not you have a healthy company and whether or not my client's going to be at risk by taking stock in your company. Well, nobody's ever asked us that. Well, I am. Mm-hmm. And doesn't it make sense? We've just provided to you tax returns, profit and loss statements, but sing along if you know the words, balance sheets, W-2s, production reports, everything on the business, and yet you're not willing to provide the other. Just provide the other. Show us that your business is solvent. Show it that it is something that my client would like to receive in stock. So,
And there's
More
strategy for tax around that too. Like there are benefits to having stock rather than all the cash at closing for your total dollar amount when you want to retire, but only if that stock actually is valuable.
pays back, correct, good. And that is so brilliant. You're good looking and you're smart, and that's a rare combination today.
Thank you.
But think about it. You just mentioned something that people really don't think. If I have a practice and they give me 1.5 million chopped up into the ways that we've mentioned, and I have $200,000 worth of equity in the company, what if that $200,000 is half of 1%? Mm-hmm. Well, when they recapitalize, I get half of 1% of what proceeds, right?
I love it. It's
map it out. Yeah, map it out. I mean, can you sell your practice twice? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no.
And there's so many sticky pieces around it. And that's where I feel like it's just I think this is where people get leery to do it. However, I think like there are some, like you said, that go really, really well, but agreed. And when I look at this, people are like, Kiera, like I thought about that doctor and I was like, so sweet. You're going to get 5 mil. That's your 10X. You're going to produce 5 million. Your overhead right now is sitting at a 50% overhead. So right now you're taking 2.5. Let's say you do get a $5 million check. You give me some taxes, it's barely over your 2.5, which you're already going to get next year. So like, yes, next year you still have to pay taxes because you're at a 50% overhead. So you will still get a small amount more of cash to you, but there's a lot of strategy that goes into that 2.5, depending upon what you need. When you invest that, like for every million, it's about like on average, if it's in the stock market, about 35,000 right now is like a very, very, very loose number to like estimate your financial future. But I'm like, you throw 2.5 into the stock market right now, well, high five, you're making about 100K a year. Like that's just, to me, those are the things that I feel you need to be really smart about to make sure that your practices are assets and not liabilities, and something that really will provide the retirement for the work you've put in, rather than it just feeling good in the moment, but not really giving the life you want.
Excellent point. And what you also said earlier, just in passing, was what dentist could buy my practice? I can't sell to a private dentist. I've got to sell to a DSO. Surprise, surprise, that's a myth.
It is a myth.
There are dentists who would, I can tell you right now, if you could give me your client's number, I'll buy her practice.
Right? I know, me too. I'm like,
well, yeah, I mean, that's gonna pencil. So the point that I would make is know that dentists that are out there who are looking to buy really profitable practices and can meet the production goals. So there's an important aspect there. Your client's doing 2.5 million in profit, 5 million in productivity on her own. If a person coming in to buy that won't be able to quite meet those production numbers, they may hire the client back for a year or two. Mm-hmm. The bank may want them to make sure that there's some kind of arrangement where they have some help. But if a bank is looking at a practice that has that kind of liquidity and profitability, they'll gladly loan the money to the dentist if other measures are there, because they know it's going to be paid back. Mm-hmm. So I want to dispel the myth that big practices with large productivity and big profitability are excluded from private practitioners being able to buy them. It's not true.
They get nervous because of the debt, but I have somebody that I know that just bought into a $2.5 million is how much they had to bring to the table. Plus they have their student loan debt, plus they have their house debt, and they were able to do it to buy into a practice. And so I'm like, I think let's not assume that that's the only route. I think figure out what you want, and there is a buyer based on the outcome you want. So I think, Fred, I want to switch gears because I want to ask some questions about associates, because I think we've kind of gone through like private practice. There's so many things, like make sure you're taken care of, make sure you know where you're going. But now I want to switch gears because I think this is something I get asked all the time. And so selfishly, again, welcome to Kiera's Therapy with Fred. I want to know all the pieces. This is my podcast that you get to be a part of. No, it's for all of you.
I'm listening.
We get asked often, how do you set up a great associate buy-in? So like, how do I buy these people in? How do I tether them in? I think one of the greatest, I would say, stressors and like blind spots in practices, and the thing that can really hurt a practice is when they have an associate, that associate leaving. And so they want to like golden handcuff these associates, but they want it to be good for both parties. What are some of those associate transitions to retain associates, to get them in as partners? Is it a good idea? Is it not a good idea? And I think like we can wrap on this because I'm super curious of like what you recommend to help with that transition.
The capacity for the business volume has to be there. You've got to have not only are you working, but there's this phantom practice out there that you can't get to as the provider, and you need somebody to be able to get to that. So bringing on an associate to get to that phantom practice immediately creates incremental income, which is, to the owner of the business, very liquid. The cost associated with treating extra people during the course of the day is the associate's compensation and variable cost, supplies and lab. And if you're providing CAD/CAM technology and your lab costs are very low, but you're producing crowns in a day, for example, and using that kind of technology, then the cost associated with treating every incremental patient and creating that revenue is very low. We're suggesting that the team in place can handle the extra work. We don't have to hire an extra assistant or hire an extra administrative person. So given those things, one of the best transition plans, in my opinion, is one that has time built into it. The associate has to develop some traction. They have to generate some productivity. They have to show that they can produce the numbers. But more importantly, the outcomes are good. The treatment outcomes are successful. The patients are adapting to them. The team connects with them. This is a good relationship. As an aside, really quick, when you mentioned relationship business in dentistry, I think DSOs traditionally are a transactional business. They're really focusing on the transaction, right? Private practice focuses on the relationship. Not to say that corporate dentistry doesn't focus on relationships. They're focused more so on the transactions. I might get ridiculed for that statement, but that's what I see. And that's my opinion.
Sure.
So back to the associate, we need the associate to develop some traction. And essentially that traction comes from being in the office, seeing patients, working with the team, and ultimately getting feedback along the way. And I think that's a 1 to 2 year cycle. Will you know, as a practitioner and owner of a business, within the first 1 or 2 months, if the associate is working 2 or 3 days a week or 4 days a week? Will you know? Do they get along with the patients? Do they get along with the team? Yes. Will you know about treatment outcomes? To some degree, yes. So early on, you'll know if this is cut bait, this is not going to work, or yes, this person's fitting in great, primarily because they were vetted. So quick retract back to how do you hire them? Go through a long process of vetting. Don't just take the first one that appears. Get to know them, make sure they're going to integrate well. I see a lot of associate plans work real well when the dentist knows the dentist owner knows the associate coming on board from some past experience. Great example is the dentist associate grew up in town, did an internship kind of in the office as a sterilization tech, kind of worked in the office, found out that dentistry was their passion, went to college for undergrad, went to dental school for dental degree, and came back to the town to work for that dentist. Right. Okay, good. So somebody you know, son of doctor owner's best friend. So there's history there. You know the quality of the individual. Okay. So once traction is developed during the part of that associate agreement, there's some discussion about ownership and building an understanding of how the practice works, so that when time comes to be a partner and buy-in, there's already some traction. There's already some traction so that if the person elects to buy the seller out in a couple years, then they can switch roles. But there has to be some traction. One of the things that's really perilous is thinking about jumping into a practice and being a partner right away. If you own a practice and you do $2 million a year, hygiene does 500, you do 1.5. I'm going to come in and I want to be a partner of yours today because I've heard how great your practice is. And you have the physical plant capacity, you have the patient capacity, and I can step right in. If I pay you half of the value of your practice today to buy in, we can split up the medicine and supplies and drugs. We can split up the equipment. We can split up the office equipment. We can split up all the operatories. But how do we split up the patients? Because come Monday morning, say we close tomorrow, Friday, come Monday morning, I need to have in my schedule the ability to generate half of the revenue in the business so that I can pay myself and I can pay to having bought in. Does that make sense? And that doesn't really happen easily when somebody just freshly wants to buy in as a partner. So fast forwarding to partnerships, which I hope we get a chance to talk a little bit about today, that associate has to be in that process, in that business for a period of time.
I agree.
And that traction needs to get up so that they've got productivity under their belt. And again, going back to what we talked about banks, they want to see that that productivity is there, that they'll be able to generate it because they want to make sure that they get the loan paid for.
Totally.
And a really good associate agreement has, in my opinion, good restrictive covenants, not to compete, not to solicit patients or staff. In some states, that's not allowed. The FTC voted that associate agreements or employment agreements should not have restrictive covenants, but there's no legislation yet that has actually mandated that.
Right.
So keep in mind that it's probably not appropriate to think that you'll be able to limit somebody's ability to work. Now, for them to essentially buy your practice, for example, and you as an agreement have a restrictive covenant that you will agree to, that's different.
Right.
Because somebody paid you good and valuable consideration, money, for you not to compete against them because they bought your business.
Right.
In an employment agreement, it's a little different. So if a dentist comes and works for another dentist who owns the business, and after a couple of months, it's just not going to work out, they're not going to have enough connection with the patient base to solicit patients or solicit staff or the team. They won't. So would it matter if there was a restrictive covenant in that initial agreement? Probably not. Because after a couple months, if they've alienated patients and alienated staff and they're not very good at dentistry, you want them out of there anyway. Forget about the restrictive covenant. They could go work for somewhere else, for somebody else close by. Because probably the same thing will happen.
I think it's really wise because I think so many offices hire an associate, but they're so scared to move them along in 2 months. I think that was wise advice you listed. It is so much easier to move them on in 2 months than it is to keep them for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, and then realize their dentistry or their team connection or their patient connection is not there. And so it's be very intentional within those first 90 days and make sure that this will be a long-term fit.
So
You
how
can
does this?
see it in 2 months.
You can. I'm sure you can. How does this sound? For the first 6 months of an associate agreement, maybe you don't have quite a good background, a deep background about that individual, but you feel that they would be good in the practice. They come recommended by their instructors at university, at dental school. Someone was highly recommended. How about a single page 6-month agreement that says, you come to work for me, I will pay you this, and if you want to go, you can go. If I feel you need to go, I'm going to release you. It's an at-will agreement, no restrictive covenants, nothing in it that locks anybody down. Because again, what I mentioned earlier is how much traction can you generate really in 1 or 2, 3, 4 months, because you'll know after 4 or 5 months that this is somebody really you want to lock in. At 6 months, develop a really strong, well-written, attorney-reviewed employment agreement that has restrictive covenants, that has specific on how to redo cases in case they need to be done at the end of the employment agreement. Right. What do you think? I mean, does that give you opportunity?
I mean, I like it. I think that the devil's advocate in me would say, I'm not sure that the millennial Gen Z generation coming through would say yes to 6 months. I think that they're looking for more security. They're looking for more guarantees. They come in with a lot more debt and a lot more risk that I am really curious. Like as a business, I think it's freaking brilliant. As on the other side, I'm curious, would you be able to get candidates that would want to come? Or is it too risky of an offer?
Yeah. Do you mean the associate dentist coming on board is thinking more about themselves rather than the practice?
I think with the associate offers that are given currently, I think agreed. It does show that they're thinking about it, but I also feel for a practice making sure that they're competitive with offers. Like I don't love having to be like with hygienists, I don't want to have to go chase them, but you have to at least be competitive with other people in the market. So
I understand what you're saying.
I think I agree with you. I just feel for practices making sure that maybe you are still competitive with other people in offer, so you do get the candidates, but you can have some of these ideas within, like that I think would make you even maybe more attractive. So maybe it's a year that we're offering, but like, hey, in the first 6 months, there's no restriction, there's no nothing. We add that in 6 months. So that way you are competitive with other people. Cause I think associates, they need that security. And I'm watching more and more come through. I mean, they're walking out with 1 mil plus 2 million in debt. Like, so I think that I think to be competitive with others, there might need to be a possibly, this is my
Well,
hallucination, that could
well,
possibly
no,
just make sure we're competitive.
so you're right on. You're in another section of what the employment agreement might look like called compensation and benefits. I'm looking at just the period of time that that a dentist would be employed in the practice to determine if it's a right fit for them, and if it's a right fit for the practice, and if it's a right fit for the patients and the team.
Right.
Compensation can say exactly what you were saying. Now, unfortunately, it isn't the responsibility of the practice to provide for somebody who is unproven in their debt or to satisfy their lifestyle requirements. Yes, they're competing with other organizations that are offering salary, health insurance, vision, life insurance policies, all of those benefits that come along with big corporations. However, it's a private practice. And the sooner I think that dentists who are coming on as associates know the intricacies and the difficulties of running a business and also the rewards that come with it, they would understand better how those arrangements are made. And I've seen compensation programs set up where it's the greater of over 2 weeks, a compensation per day or a percentage of a certain amount over a certain amount of productivity. So you can meet those requirements. You can kind of meet halfway in between.
Yeah. And I think that's where I was saying, if I feel like making sure that you're meeting in the middle, I love the idea of being able to protect, like you're right, like not being stuck in this with someone who's not working out and getting stuck, I think is actually something that happens all the time with associates. And so I think like, Fred, it was such a fun like chat about associates. I agree. We need to chat more partnerships, because now it's like, okay, we've got these associates, we've got some ideas on it. We've heard about figuring out where we want to go and how we're going to be able to get there, and needing to think about our future life and how, when we need to transition. You said the 3 to 5 years. I think looking for like, what do I need to do to be able to buy a practice? If I want to buy a practice, what do I need to get? Then we talked about like the DSO offers coming for private practices and how to assess that through Fred. And then we moved into associates. So Fred, like that was such a like smorgasbord of topics, which I love.
It
And
was
I
fun.
think definitely reconnecting, because I think there's the next step is like, how do we bring in these associates for partners if we want them? How can we build a legacy practice that's not necessarily just the DSO? So I'd love to get you back on the podcast and chat partnerships and like alternative transitions beyond.
I
But gosh,
am
Fred, such a fun podcast today.
happy to do it anytime. I appreciate what you do for dentistry, so I'll absolutely support you and be glad to do it.
Thank you. Well, Fred, as we wrap up today, were there any last thoughts you had to give to the listeners? And of course, ArizonaTransitions.com, Arizona Transitions at Gmail, if you're looking to transition or associates or what do I do, or hey, Fred, I just need help. But any last thoughts you have as we wrap up
Yeah,
today?
I think I tell you a funny quip that I think resonates with most people that I talk to. Dentists are excellent at curing dental disease, at diagnosing conditions and recommending treatments and working with patients to get them well. And coming into an event like purchasing a practice or selling a practice where they've never done it before, they don't have the experience or the education going in to understand what to do. I would encourage them to get advice and guidance from a great team. I have a deal with my dentist. Mike Smith is brilliant. He has a practice called The Biting Edge here in Phoenix, and he's brilliant. And he and I have an agreement. I don't do my own dentistry. And he doesn't do his own practice transition stuff or practice management stuff. He relies on me to do that because there in the middle we meet. So I want him to cure my dental conditions and make sure I'm in the optimum dental health that I could be. And I'm going to make sure that I provide the services to him so that if he's looking to acquire a practice or merge an office into his, or figure out how the next plan would be for his practice growth or his transition, that he's going to sit down with me because he understands that that's my expertise and he benefits from it.
Yeah. I love that. That's such a good way to look at it of, let's sit in our lanes. Let's do what we're really good at and not try to be a
Exactly.
one-stop shop.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's brilliant, Fred. And I feel like for all those looking for the transitions, for what do we do? How can I do it? Reach out, Fred. I think you're a wealth of knowledge. You've been in it for a long time, and just truly so grateful to have you on the podcast today.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you. And
Bye,
thank
Kiera.
you, Fred. Thank you, all of you. And for all of you listening, thanks for listening. And I'll catch you next time on the Dental Team Podcast.